What does a person do when everything they love is taken in a single day? 25 centuries ago, in the city of Sāvatthī, there was a young woman who walked through the streets calling names that no one could answer. Her name was Pātācārā. By the time she came into the city, she had lost, within 36 hours, her husband, her 2 children, her father, her mother, and her brother. This story is preserved in the Therīgāthā, the verses of the elder nuns. In the verses Pātācārā composed, with a commentary by Buddhist on the 113th verse of the Dhammapada. It is one of the strangest stories of grief in the canon, because what was taken from her was not one thing, but everything. And because what gave it back to her was not consolation and not time, but 4 words spoken to her in a grove. To understand the 4 words, you have to understand what was taken first. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant in Sāvatthī. The household had servants. Among them was a young man whose work she had watched since girlhood. She fell in love with him. Her father had arranged her marriage to a man of her own rank. The wedding was to be soon. The night before the marriage was set, she went to the servant. She said, "We are leaving." They went out of the house in the dark with what she could carry. They walked through the streets of Sāvatthī while the city slept. They left through the eastern gate before the watchmen began their rounds. By daylight, they had reached a small village a day's journey out, at the edge of the rice fields where no one knew her name. They stayed there. She kept his house. He worked his small piece of land. After a year, she gave birth to a son. After 3 more years, she was pregnant again. When the time of the second child came near, she said to her husband, "I want to go home. I want my mother to see this child. I want my father to see him." He hesitated. The wife of a poor farmhand did not return easily to the house of a wealthy merchant. He said, "Wait until after the child comes." She agreed. But when the time came, the labor was longer than they expected and harder. She was uneasy. She said again, "I want to go home." This time, with the older boy walking beside them, they began the journey. The road from the village to Sāvatthī took 2 days at a careful pace. They had been on it less than half a day when the rains came. The storm rose without warning. The clouds had been low all morning, but the wind had been quiet. Then, in an hour, the wind turned, and the rain came down in sheets, and the road became mud. She was heavily pregnant. The older boy was tired. Her husband stopped at a place where the trees thickened and said, "We will shelter here. I will gather wood. I will build a small lean-to. We will wait the rain out." She sat down with the boy under the tree. He went to the edge of the woods to cut grass and small branches. In the grass at the foot of a tree, a snake was waiting. The snake struck him in the leg. He cried out once and went down where he stood. She went to him. The leg was already swelling. He did not speak again clearly. By the time the rain slowed, he was still. She delivered the second child by herself in the dark, beside her husband's body, in the rain at the edge of the road. The rain ended in the morning. Then the snake. In the morning she rose. She wrapped the second child against her chest. She took the older boy by the hand. She walked. She walked all that day. She buried her husband at a place beside the road, with stones, the way travelers buried strangers. She did not stop long. She walked. By evening, she came to the Achiravati. The river had risen with the rain. It was running fast and brown and wide. There was no boat. She stood at the bank for a long time, the baby asleep at her chest, the older boy holding her hand. She knelt. She set the older boy down on the bank. She said, "Stay. I will come back for you." She lifted the baby and stepped into the river. The water was at her knees and then her thighs and then her waist. The current was strong, but she was strong. She crossed. She set the baby on the far bank in a soft place between 2 stones. She said, "Wait." She turned back. She stepped into the river to bring the older boy. She was halfway across when she heard the cry above her. A hawk had come down out of the high gray sky. She waved her arms. She tried to drive the bird off the baby with her voice, with her hands, with the only motion she could make from the middle of the river. On the far bank, the older boy saw her wave. He thought she was calling him to come. He stepped into the river behind her. The current took him. The hawk took the baby. She stood in the middle of the Therīgāthā with both hands empty. Then the snake, then the river. She came up out of the river on the city side, wet, alone. She walked the rest of that night. She walked the next day. The road bent towards Sāvatthī, and the city rose on the plain ahead of her, and she walked into it. The streets were familiar. She had been a girl in these lanes. She knew which doorway was the spice merchants, and which was the lacquer workers, and which was her father's. 3 streets over from the great market. She came to her father's street. She did not see her father's house. Where the wall had been, there was a place where the wall had been. Where the courtyard had stood, there was a heap of broken roof tiles and the wind moving through them. The storm had been worse here. The roof had collapsed in the night her husband was bitten. Her mother had been inside. Her father had been inside. Her brother had been inside. A neighbor stood at the edge of the wreckage. He was the first to recognize her. He told her gently what had happened. She did not seem to hear. She walked on. Then the snake. Then the river. Then the house. She walked the streets of Sāvatthī. She walked them in the order she had walked them as a girl. The lane to the well. The lane to the market. The lane that ran along the eastern wall. She walked them calling names. Her husband's name. Her older boy's name. The name she had given the baby that morning. By the road in the rain. Her mother's name. Her father's name. Her brother's name. She walked on. A merchant came out of his shop and said, "Lady, go home." She did not have a home. She walked on. A woman at a doorway tried to give her water. She did not take it. She walked on. The cloth she had wrapped herself in by the river had been wet and worn and was coming apart. The walking loosened it. It fell from her shoulders and she did not notice. The people of Sāvatthī, who had known her as a girl, looked at the woman walking through the streets, calling names, and did not recognize her, and were afraid. A man took up a stone and thought to drive her off. But before he had thrown it, a monk on the road said, "Let her be." He pointed to the southern edge of the city, to a grove beyond the wall, where another teacher was sitting that afternoon. The man set the stone down. She walked on. The grove was on the southern side of the city, beyond the wall. She came to its edge in the late afternoon. There was an assembly seated in the trees, monks in saffron, men and women of the city. The light was low between the trunks, and the air was very still, and there was the small sound of cloth and breath and a single voice speaking. She stopped at the edge of the assembly. She did not enter. She did not sit. She stood at the threshold of the grove with her arms at her sides. Some among the assembly saw her and turned their faces away. Some called out, "Get her clothed, give her a robe, do not let her come in like this." The teacher at the center of the assembly looked up. He looked across the seated figures. He looked across the open ground at the threshold of the grove. He looked at the woman standing there, and he said plainly as one person speaks to another, "Sister, recover your senses." The words were not loud. They were not raised. They crossed the open ground of the grove, and they reached her where she stood, and they entered the place in her that had been somewhere else since the river. She came back into her own body. She heard for the first time in 3 days the sound of her own breath. "Sister, recover your senses." Someone brought a robe. She was clothed. She came into the grove. She sat down at the edge of the seated assembly. She stayed. She was given the robe. She was given the bowl. In time, she was ordained into the order of nuns that had been founded for women like her, women whose old lives had ended. The years passed. She walked the alms round in the streets of Sāvatthī, where she had once walked calling names. The streets did not forget. Some doorways closed when she passed. Some doorways set out a small bowl of rice in the morning on the wall. She bore it. She swept the stones at the threshold of her hut. She kept her bowl clean. She mended her robe when it tore. She sat in the afternoon, and she sat in the evening, and she sat in the dark before dawn. Something in her, very slowly, was settling, like silt at the bottom of a clear pot of water, slowly and slowly and slowly. But it had not yet finished settling. There was a place in her, still, a place at the river, that had not yet come back. The current was still in it. The hawk was still in it. The boy on the bank was still calling. One evening after the alms round, she went to the well at the edge of the cloister to wash her feet. She knelt at the well stone, and she poured water from her bowl over her feet. She poured the first time. The water ran out across the stones of the well step, and went a short distance and drained into the earth. She watched it go. She poured a second time. The water went further. It ran past the edge of the stone, into the dust of the courtyard, and drained again, at a longer distance from her foot. She watched it go. She poured a third time. The water went further still. It ran out into the open ground beyond the well, and drained at a still longer distance. Once, twice, a third time. She knelt at the well stone with the empty bowl in her hand, and she saw then what the river had not let her see, that a life is not held, that what runs out, at a short distance, and at a longer distance, and at a longer distance still, and is gone, and that the holding had never been hers to do. She set the bowl down beside the well. She stayed there. A young woman, whose family was taken in a day, who walked into a city calling names, until 4 words returned her to her body, and the water at her feet showed her how a life ends.